Sign the papers, Whitney. You were an investment that failed to mature, Quentin whispered, his voice smooth as poison, loud enough for his mistress in the back row to hear and giggle. Look at you. You're 30, wearing a polyester suit, and fighting for a toaster oven. I'm doing you a favor by setting you free to find someone in your tax bracket. He didn't know the woman trembling before him wasn't shaking from fear. She was shaking because she was about to buy the bank that held his mortgage, the fluorescent lights of the Los Angeles Superior Court, Stanley Mosque location, had a way of stripping away human dignity, leaving everyone looking pale, tired, and exposed. But for Whitney Kingsley, the exposure felt surgical. She sat at the defendant's table, her hands clasped tightly over the scuffed mahogany, staring at a stain on the wood that looked vaguely like a Rorschach test of her shattered marriage. To her left sat her court-appointed mediator, a frantic woman named Mrs. Gable, who was currently juggling 3 other divorce cases via text message under the table. To her right, across the aisle, sat Quentin Ellington. Quentin didn't just sit, he sprawled. He occupied space with the arrogance of a man who had recently closed a Series B funding round for his tech startup, Nebula Flow. He wore a bespoke navy suit, cut Italian slim, and on his wrist sat a Patek Philippe Nautilus, a gift he had bought himself the day he filed for divorce. Mr. Ellington, Judge Holloway sighed, adjusting his glasses. We are here to finalize the division of assets. Your counsel claims that Ms. Kingsley is entitled to nothing. Quentin stood up. He didn't wait for his high-priced attorney, a shark named Marcus Thorne, to speak. Quentin liked the sound of his own voice too much. Your Honor, it's not that I want her to have nothing, Quentin said, turning slightly to flash a pitying smile at Whitney. It's that she contributed nothing. The prenuptial agreement was clear. What is mine is mine. What is hers is... Well, she brought a Honda Civic and a cat into the marriage. She can keep the cat. The Civic, unfortunately, the lease is in my name. A ripple of laughter came from the gallery. Whitney didn't need to turn around to know it was Zena Harrington. Zena was 22, an influencer with 2 million followers and the emotional depth of a puddle. She was currently live-streaming the aftermath of the hearing, waiting for Quentin to emerge victorious so they could fly to St. Bart's. Whitney stood slowly. She wore a charcoal grey suit she had bought at a thrift store. It was clean, pressed, but the fabric was cheap and the fit was slightly off in the shoulders. Your Honor, she said, her voice soft but steady. I supported Mr. Ellington for 5 years while he built his code. I worked double shifts at the Grind coffee shop. I paid the rent on our studio apartment so he could buy servers. I am asking for fair consideration of spousal support until I can finish my degree. Quentin laughed. It was a dry, barking sound. Support? Whitney, be realistic. You poured coffee. I built an empire. You're asking for equity in a skyscraper because you once held a flashlight for the architect. It's embarrassing. He walked closer to the railing, violating the personal space boundaries, but the bailiff didn't stop him. Quentin leaned in, his cologne, Santal 33, cloying and expensive. Look at you, he sneered, his voice dropping so only the front row could hear. You're pathetic. You're wearing shoes with scuffs on the heels. You have no connections, no lineage, no future. You attached yourself to me, hoping for a payout. I'm the best thing that ever happened to you, and you blew it by being boring, by being ordinary. Judge Holloway banged the gavel. Mr. Ellington, step back. I'm just stating facts, Your Honor, Quentin said, raising his hands in mock surrender. She wants half of my future earnings? She doesn't even understand what I do. She's a waitress, Your Honor. A very nice waitress, I'm sure, but let's not pretend she's a partner. Whitney looked at him, really looked at him. For the last 6 months, since he had served her papers at her grandmother's funeral, she had cried, begged, and bargained. But today, something inside her calcified. The love she had held for him, the memories of them eating ramen on the floor of their first apartment, evaporated. "Is that your final stance, Quentin?" Whitney asked. "That I am worth nothing to you?" "Monetarily, yes," Quentin smirked. "Emotionally, you're a sunk cost." Whitney nodded slowly. She turned to the judge. "I withdraw my request for spousal support, Your Honor." The courtroom went silent. Mrs. Gable dropped her phone. Even Quentin looked confused. "I withdraw the request," Whitney repeated, her chin lifting. "I want a clean break. No alimony, no settlement. Just the divorce decree, effective immediately." "Whitney, are you sure?" the judge asked, frowning. "You are entitled by California law to—" "I don't want his money," Whitney said, her voice ringing clear like a bell. "I don't want a single penny that has his name on it. He's right. I was an investment that failed. I'd like to close the account." Quentin looked at Zena and winked, mouthing, "She's crazy." He turned back to the judge. "We accept, Your Honor. Fast track it." The gavel banged. "So ordered. Dissolution granted." As the courtroom cleared, Quentin brushed past Whitney, shouldering her aside. "You always were an idiot," he whispered. "You could have gotten at least $5,000 out of me to go away. Now you'll be serving lattes until you're 50. "Goodbye, Quentin," Whitney said. She didn't look back. She walked out of the heavy wooden doors, past Zena, who was snapping a selfie with the caption, "Finally free," and stepped onto the marble steps of the courthouse. The sun was blinding. Whitney reached into her cheap purse and pulled out a phone. It wasn't the cracked iPhone Quentin thought she used. It was a secure, encrypted satellite phone. She dialed a number from memory. "Status?" A deep voice answered on the first ring. "It's done," Whitney said. "The marriage is dissolved. My legal ties to Quentin Ellington are severed completely. He has no claim on my assets." "Understood, Miss Kingsley," the voice, Uriel Dalton, replied. "The board has been convened. The Noble Family Trust is unlocking your credentials as we speak. The jet is waiting at Van Nuys." "I'm not going to the jet yet, Uriel," Whitney said, watching Quentin's bright yellow Lamborghini scream out of the parking lot. "Where are you going, Mom?" "I have a shift at the coffee shop," Whitney said. "I finish what I start." The contrast between Whitney's secret reality and her public existence was a jagged line she had walked for 7 years. After the courthouse, she drove her dented 2014 Honda Civic to The Grind, a hipster coffee shop in Silver Lake. The smell of roasted beans and stale almond milk was a comfort. This job had been her camouflage. "Hey, Whit, you okay?" Hannah Noble asked from behind the counter. Hannah wasn't just a co-worker. To the world, Hannah was a 20-something college dropout with pink hair and a nose ring. In reality, Hannah was Whitney's cousin, the youngest daughter of the Noble banking dynasty, and one of the few people who knew the truth. They were hiding in plain sight. "He called me a sunk cost," Whitney said, tying her apron. She grabbed a rag and started wiping down the espresso machine. "He mocked my shoes, Han." Hannah snorted, banging a portafilter against the knockbox. "The shoes are terrible, to be fair. But that's the point. Did he sign?" "He signed. He thinks he won." "Good." Hannah's expression darkened. "Because Mason is not doing well. The doctors say it's a matter of days. You cut it close, Whit." Mason Noble. The name commanded respect in boardrooms from Tokyo to London. He was the patriarch of the Noble Kingsley Empire, a conglomerate that owned shipping lines, rare earth mines, and, ironically, the venture capital firm that had just funded Quentin's company. Whitney was his granddaughter. 7 years ago, Whitney had walked away from the family. She had wanted to know if she could survive without the name. She wanted to know if someone could love her, not the billions attached to her DNA. She had met Quentin, a struggling coder with big dreams and holes in his sweaters. She fell for his passion. She thought they were building something together. She had hidden her identity to protect him from the pressure and to protect herself from the doubt. She had planned to tell him on their 5th anniversary. Instead, on their 4th, he had started sleeping with Zena Harrington and calling Whitney dead weight because she couldn't get him into the exclusive Soho house, unaware that her family owned the building. "I'm going to see Mason tonight," Whitney whispered. "Cover for me?" "Always," Hannah said. "But be careful. Quentin Rockwell is circling." Whitney stiffened at the name. Quentin Rockwell. No relation to her ex-husband, Quentin Ellington, though the universe had a sick sense of humor, giving them the same first name. Quentin Rockwell was a corporate raider, a man who stripped companies for parts. He was currently the interim CEO of Noble Enterprises, appointed during Mason's illness. He was a shark who smelled blood in the water. "Rockwell doesn't know I exist," Whitney said. "He thinks Mason's heir died in a skiing accident in the Alps 10 years ago." "Rockwell knows someone is out there," Hannah warned. "He's been auditing the blind trusts. He's looking for the leak." Whitney finished her shift in a daze. She served lattes to rude hipsters, wiped tables, and took out the trash. It was a penance, a final grounding ritual. She needed to remember what it felt like to be invisible, because soon she would never be invisible again. At 10 p.m., she left the shop. She didn't go to her studio apartment in Reseda. She drove to a nondescript parking garage in Century City. She parked the Civic on the 4th floor, walked to a maintenance elevator, and swiped a black keycard that had been sewn into the lining of her purse. The elevator didn't go down. It went up. It bypassed the lobby, bypassed the offices, and opened directly into the penthouse of the Andromeda Tower. The room was silent, smelling of antiseptic and old leather. Medical machinery beeped rhythmically in the center of the vast living room that had been converted into a hospice suite. Lying in the bed, frail as a dried leaf, was Mason Noble. Whitney approached the bed. She took off her cheap polyester blazer and threw it on the floor. "Grandfather," she whispered. Mason's eyes opened. They were milky with cataracts, but the steel behind them was still there. He reached out a trembling hand. "Did you flush the rat?" Mason rasped. His voice was weak, but his mind was sharp. He had hated Quentin Ellington from the moment he saw a photo of him. A man who looks in the mirror more than he looks at his wife is a man who will sell you for a compliment, Mason had warned. "The rat is gone," Whitney said, taking his hand. "Divorce finalized today." "Good," Mason coughed, a wet, rattling sound. "Then you are ready. The wolves are at the door, Whitney. Rockwell, he's trying to force a vote. He wants to merge Noble Enterprises with a shell company in the Caymans. He wants to gut the legacy. I won't let him." "You have to stop hiding," Mason said, gripping her hand with surprising strength. "You proved your point. You lived like a pauper. You loved a fool. Lesson learned. Now you must be a queen. Do you accept the weight?" Whitney looked at the dying man. She thought of Quentin Ellington's laugh in the courtroom. She thought of Zena's sneer. She thought of the way the world treated people who had nothing. "I accept," Whitney said. "Then open the safe." Mason pointed to the painting of a storm-tossed ship on the wall. "Take the ring. Take the seal. And tomorrow you go to the board meeting. And you burn them all down." Mason Noble died an hour later. Whitney didn't cry. She sat by his bedside, watching the sunrise paint the city of Los Angeles in gold and purple. The city that thought she was a waitress? She stood up. She walked to the safe. She took out a heavy velvet box. Inside was the noble signet, a heavy platinum ring with a black diamond, and next to it, a file marked Project Karma. She opened the file. It was a dossier on Quentin Ellington. Mason had been watching. He had every dirty secret, every illegal shortcut Quentin had taken to build Nebula Flow. "Oh, Grandpa," Whitney smiled, a cold, terrifying smile. "You really did think of everything." The funeral for Mason Noble was a private affair, but the reading of the will and the subsequent emergency board meeting of Noble Enterprises was the social event of the season. Though few knew the true stakes, it was held 3 days later at the Noble headquarters, a glass monolith in downtown LA. The boardroom was filled with men in $5,000 suits. At the head of the table sat Quentin Rockwell. Rockwell was a large man with a shaved head and eyes like a shark. He checked his watch. "Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come. Mason Noble has passed without a declared heir. By the bylaws of this corporation, control reverts to the board, and as chairman, I move for an immediate vote to acquire Ellington Tech, formerly Nebula Flow, as our new digital arm." A murmur went through the room. "Why are we acquiring a mid-tier startup?" a board member asked. "Because," Rockwell smiled, "it shows we are modern, and because the CEO, Mr. Quentin Ellington, shows promise. He's hungry." Rockwell didn't mention that he had made a backroom deal with Quentin Ellington. Rockwell would buy Ellington's company for an inflated price, $500 million, and in exchange, Ellington would help Rockwell launder money through the tech infrastructure. It was a match made in hell. "Call in Mr. Ellington," Rockwell commanded. The double doors opened. Quentin Ellington walked in, looking like he owned the world. Zena was waiting in the lobby, but he had brought his A game. He shook hands with Rockwell. "An honor, sir," Ellington said. "I'm ready to take Noble Enterprises into the future." "We are voting on the acquisition now," Rockwell said. "All in favor?" Hands started to go up. "I object," a voice cut through the air. It wasn't a loud voice. It was melodic, calm, and carried the weight of absolute authority. The doors at the far end of the room, the ones reserved for the Noble family, which hadn't been opened in 10 years, swung open. Whitney Kingsley walked in, but it wasn't the Whitney from the courtroom. The polyester suit was gone. In its place was a crimson silk dress by Alexander McQueen, tailored to perfection, sharp as a blade. On her feet were Louboutin So-Kates, the red soles flashing like warning lights. Her hair, usually tied in a messy bun, was blown out in sleek, obsidian waves, and on her finger, visible to everyone, was the black diamond signet. Quentin Ellington dropped his water glass. It shattered on the floor. "Whitney, what are you doing here? The catering entrance is in the back." Rockwell narrowed his eyes. He recognized the ring. He felt the blood drain from his face. "Who are you?" Whitney didn't look at her ex-husband. She walked straight to the head of the table, flanked by Uriel Dalton and Olivia Anderson, the top litigator in the state. "Get out of my chair," Whitney said to Rockwell. "Excuse me?" Rockwell stood up, his face reddening. "Security." "Sit down, Mr. Rockwell," Uriel Dalton said, placing a heavy document on the table. "This is the last will and testament of Mason Noble, and this is the birth certificate of Whitney Kingsley Noble, his granddaughter, his sole heir." Silence. Absolute, suffocating silence. Quentin Ellington let out a strangled noise. "Granddaughter? No, that's impossible. She's poor. Her car doesn't even have air conditioning." Whitney finally turned to him. The look in her eyes wasn't anger. It was boredom. "Hello, Quentin," she said. "You were right in court. I was hiding something. I was hiding the fact that my family could buy and sell your entire existence before breakfast. She turned back to the board. I am Whitney Noble. I own 51% of the voting stock of this company, and I am freezing all acquisitions immediately. You can't do that, Rockwell shouted. The deal with Ellington is practically done. The deal is dead, Whitney said, taking the seat at the head of the table as Rockwell was forced to scramble aside. And as for Nebula Flow, she picked up the file Mason had left her. We aren't buying it, Whitney said, opening the folder. We're auditing it. Mr. Ellington, my forensic accountants have found some interesting discrepancies in your user data. It seems you've been inflating your numbers to secure loans. That's fraud, Quentin. Quentin Ellington went pale. Whitney, wait. Baby, let's talk. Baby? Whitney raised an eyebrow. I believe the term you used was sunk cost. She pressed a button on the intercom. Security, please escort Mr. Ellington off the premises and notify the SEC. I think they'll want to see these files. Quentin Ellington began to stammer, sweating through his Italian suit. Whitney, we're married. We're partners. Divorced, Whitney corrected, holding up the papers he had been so eager to sign. As of yesterday, you wanted nothing, Quentin. You got it. As security dragged a shouting Quentin Ellington out of the room, Whitney looked at Quentin Rockwell. The older shark was staring at her with a mix of hatred and fear. Round one, Mr. Rockwell, Whitney said, smoothing her red dress. Shall we begin the real business? The drama was just starting. Whitney had revealed her name, but the war for her legacy and her soul had only just begun. She had crushed her ex-husband, but Rockwell was a different beast entirely. And somewhere, in the shadows of the internet, the story of the barista billionaire was about to leak, and the world would demand a show. The explosion didn't happen in a boardroom or a courtroom. It happened on a smartphone screen, specifically on the feed of Pop Culture Tea, a YouTube drama channel with 6 million subscribers run by a commentator named Truth Seeker. Quentin Ellington sat in his minimalist glass-walled office at Nebula Flow, nursing a scotch at 11 Cest a.m. His hands were shaking. The SEC audit notification was sitting on his desk, a heavy cream-colored envelope that felt like a death sentence. He had been trying to reach Zena all morning, but she wasn't answering. Sir, his assistant, a young man named Dave who looked terrified, knocked on the glass. You need to see this. Quentin waved him off. Not now, Dave. I'm strategizing. Sir, it's trending. #1 worldwide, above the election, above the Super Bowl. Quentin snatched the iPad from Dave's hands. The video thumbnail showed a split screen. On the left was a blurry cell phone video taken from outside the Stanley Moss Courthouse yesterday. It showed Quentin Ellington in his navy suit, sneering at a woman in a grey polyester outfit. The audio was crystal clear. You were an investment that failed to mature. On the right side of the screen was a high-definition photo taken inside the Noble Enterprises boardroom just hours ago. It showed the same woman, Whitney, radiating power in crimson Alexander McQueen, the noble black diamond prominent on her finger, pointing a finger at a cowering Quentin. The video title, Tech Bro Discards Wife, Finds Out She Owns the World. Quentin clicked play. The narrator, Truth Seeker, was practically vibrating with excitement. Guys, grab your snacks because the tea today is piping hot. It is scalding. You know Quentin Ellington, the CEO of Nebula Flow who poses for Forbes covers and talks about mindset? Well, yesterday he divorced his wife of 5 years, Whitney. He called her a sunk cost in open court. He left her with nothing. Absolutely zero. Less than 24 hours later, she walks into the Noble Enterprises board meeting. Yes, the Noble Enterprises, and reveals she is the sole heiress to the $40 billion fortune. And the best part? She fired him. She didn't just fire him, she evicted him from the building. Look at Zena Harrington's live stream from the background. The video cut to Zena's footage from the courtroom. In the background of her selfie, Whitney could be seen walking away with quiet dignity, while Quentin mocked her. The internet detectives had enhanced the audio. Every cruel word was audible. Quentin scrolled down to the comments. There were 50,000 of them. He fumbled the bag? No, he fumbled the whole bank. The way she walked out without screaming? That's queen energy. He's done. Forget the drama, look at the ticker. Noble Enterprises stock just jumped 12% on the news of her taking over. Nebula flow is crashing. Sell now. Quentin threw the iPad across the room. It shattered against the wall. Get Zena on the phone, he screamed. She posted that footage. She ruined me. Ms. Harrington, Dave stammered. She just posted a story. She's claiming she didn't know you were married. She says she's a victim of your manipulation. Quentin laughed, a hysterical, jagged sound. She was at the divorce hearing. She sat in the front row. The internet doesn't care about facts, sir. They care about the narrative. And the narrative is that you are the villain of the decade. His phone rang. It wasn't Zena. It was the landlord of the Nebula Flow office building. Mr. Ellington. The voice was cold. We've received notice from the parent company that your lease has been terminated effective immediately due to a violation of the morality clause. Parent company? Quentin gripped the desk. Who owns this building? Noble Real Estate Holdings, sir. A subsidiary of Noble Enterprises. You have 2 hours to vacate the premises. Quentin dropped the phone. Whitney wasn't just suing him. She was erasing him. She was systematically turning off the lights in his life, one switch at a time. Meanwhile, in the penthouse office of the Noble Tower, Whitney watched the same video. She sat in Mason's leather chair, which still smelled faintly of his cigars. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt heavy. The public sentiment is 98% in your favor, Hannah said, scrolling through Twitter on a tablet. They're calling you the Countess of Karma. Team Whitney is trending. It's noise, Whitney said, turning her chair to look out at the smoggy Los Angeles skyline. Quentin Ellington is a distraction. Rockwell is the threat. Rockwell has gone dark, Uriel Dalton said from the corner. The security chief was reviewing surveillance feeds. He hasn't left his estate in Bel Air, but his lawyers are busy. They're filing an injunction to challenge Mason's will. They're claiming mental incapacity. They say Mason was too sick to sign the transfer of power. He signed it 3 days before he died, Whitney said. He was lucid. They have a doctor who says otherwise. Olivia Anderson, her lawyer, walked in, throwing a file on the desk. Dr. Aris Thorne. He was one of Mason's palliative care specialists. Rockwell paid him off. Thorne is prepared to testify that Mason was hallucinating when he gave you the signet. Whitney's eyes narrowed. If they invalidate the will, the company reverts to the board, and the board is loyal to Rockwell. Exactly, Olivia said. We need to discredit Thorne, and we need to do it before the emergency injunction hearing on Friday. Whitney stood up. She walked to the window, her reflection ghosting against the glass. The ordinary girl who served coffee was gone. In her place was a strategist. Hannah, Whitney said, you remember that time Quentin Ellington bragged about his exclusive medical concierge service on his podcast? Yeah, Hannah nodded. He said he gets the same doctors as the billionaires. Find out if Dr. Thorne is on that list, Whitney said. If Rockwell and Ellington are connected through more than just the failed acquisition, if they share the same dirty doctor, we don't just win the injunction, we bury them both for conspiracy. Quentin Ellington's fall was not a slide. It was a base jump without a parachute. By Wednesday, Nebula Flow was a ghost town. The employees, sensing the radioactive fallout, had started resigning en masse. The venture capital firms that had backed him were pulling their term sheets, citing material adverse changes. But Quentin was a narcissist, and narcissists do not accept defeat. They rewrite reality. He decided to go on the offensive. He booked an interview with the Daily Standard, a respected financial news program, to tell his side of the story. He put on his best suit, the one he hadn't sweated through yet, and sat in the studio chair opposite a seasoned journalist named Diane Sawyer-esque figure named Maria Vance. "Mr. Ellington," Maria began, her face impassive, "you claim that Whitney Kingsley, now Whitney Noble, deceived you." "She did, Maria," Quentin said, using his practiced, visionary voice. "I married a woman I thought was a partner, a simple, humble woman. For 5 years, she lied to me every single day. She hid billions of dollars while I worked myself to the bone. That is financial infidelity. I am the victim here." "You called her a bad investment in court," Maria noted, glancing at her notes. "You mocked her poverty." "That was taken out of context," Quentin lied smoothly. "It was banter. We had a playful relationship." "I see," Maria said. She pressed a finger to her earpiece. "Mr. Ellington, we've just received breaking news regarding your company, Nebula Flow." Quentin smiled confidently. "Ah, yes. Our user growth numbers. They are impressive." "No," Maria said, her voice dropping an octave. "Federal agents are currently raiding your offices in Silicon Beach. The SEC has issued a warrant for your arrest on charges of wire fraud, securities fraud, and embezzlement." The color drained from Quentin's face so fast it looked like a special effect. "What? That's preposterous." "We have live footage," Maria said. The studio monitor behind him flared to life. It showed agents in FBI windbreakers carrying boxes out of the Nebula Flow lobby, and then the camera panned to a familiar figure being led out in handcuffs. It wasn't Quentin, it was his CFO. "Your chief financial officer seems to be cooperating," Maria said, looking at Quentin with the precision of a sniper. "Sources say he has turned over the real books, the ones that show you used investor money to fund a lifestyle of private jets and, let's see here, a $200,000 engagement ring for a Miss Xena Harrington." Quentin stood up, ripping the microphone off his lapel. "This interview is over. Cut the feed." "We are live, Mr. Ellington," Maria said calmly. Quentin scrambled off the set, tripping over a cable. The camera followed him as he ran into the hallway, right into the arms of 2 waiting U.S. Marshals. "Quentin Ellington?" one of them asked. "You can't touch me. I know people. I know Quentin Rockwell." Quentin screamed, flailing as they cuffed him. It was the slip of the tongue that changed everything. Whitney was watching from the back of a black SUV parked outside the studio. She lowered her sunglasses. "He just implicated Rockwell on live TV," Hannah said from the seat beside her, holding a bag of popcorn. "You called it. You knew he would crack." "Quentin Ellington never knew when to stop talking," Whitney said. "He thought he was the main character. He never realized he was just the comic relief." She tapped the driver's partition. "Take us to Billionaire. It's time to pay Mr. Rockwell a visit." But the victory over her ex-husband felt hollow. Seeing him dragged away didn't fix the years of emotional neglect. It didn't erase the feeling of being small. It just balanced the ledger. The real monster was still waiting at the top of the hill. As the car pulled away, Whitney's phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Hello?" "You think you're clever, little girl." The voice was gravel and smoke. "Quentin Rockwell." "You think sacrificing your pawn takes the king?" "I think the king is exposed," Whitney replied, her voice steady. Ellington just named you. He's a frantic lunatic. No one will believe him. But they will believe the medical report that says your grandfather had dementia, Rockwell hissed, and they will believe the report I'm about to release on you. What report? The one about your time in the psychiatric facility in Switzerland, 10 years ago, after your parents died. Whitney's breath hitched. That was a secret buried deeper than the bank accounts. After the car crash that killed her parents, a teenage Whitney had spent 6 months in a grief recovery center. It wasn't a psych ward, but Rockwell would spin it that way. Unstable, traumatized, unfit to lead. You stay away from my past, Whitney warned. Resign, Rockwell said. Step down as chairwoman by midnight, or the world finds out the barista billionaire is actually just a rich girl with a broken brain. He hung up. Whitney stared at the phone. Her hands started to tremble, a phantom echo of the girl she used to be. Whit? Hannah touched her arm. What did he say? Whitney looked up. The fear was there. Yes. But beneath it, the steel Mason had recognized was hardening. He's going to weaponize my grief, Whitney said. He wants to shame me for surviving. What do we do? Whitney looked at the screen of her phone, where the live stream of Quentin's arrest was playing on a loop. We don't hide, Whitney said. He wants to expose me? Fine. I'll turn the lights up so bright he burns. The emergency board meeting on Friday was less a corporate gathering and more a gladiatorial arena. The atmosphere was thick with tension. The stock price was volatile, bouncing between the optimism of Whitney's takeover and the fear of the looming legal battles. Quentin Rockwell sat at the far end of the table, smugness radiating off him like heat waves. He had his medical expert, Dr. Thorne, sitting beside him. He also had a stack of files, the leak about Whitney's mental health history. Whitney walked in alone. She wasn't wearing the red dress today. She wore a tailored white suit. Sharp, clean, unapologetic. Chairwoman, Rockwell nodded mockingly. I'm surprised you showed up. I thought you might be resting. I'll rest when the parasites are removed from this company, Whitney said, taking her seat. Let's get to it, Rockwell announced to the board. I move for a vote of no confidence in Whitney Noble. We have evidence that the transfer of power was coerced from a senile man by a woman with a documented history of mental instability. He slid the file down the table. Medical records, Switzerland. She was institutionalized, gentlemen. Do we want a hysterical girl with daddy issues running a global conglomerate? The old men on the board muttered. They looked at the file. They looked at Whitney. Sexism was a subtle current in the room, and Rockwell was riding it perfectly. Whitney didn't reach for the file. She didn't try to hide it. Is that it? Whitney asked. My grief? That's your weapon? She stood up. Yes. I was in a facility. I was 19. I watched my parents burn to death in a car wreck. I broke, and then I put myself back together. I learned how to survive when my world ended. Can you say the same, Mr. Rockwell? Or have you only ever destroyed things? Touching, Rockwell sneered. But shareholders don't care about your sob story. They care about stability. Speaking of stability, Whitney signaled to the door. Uriel, let them in. The doors opened, but it wasn't police. It was a woman, a middle-aged woman looking terrified, clutching a purse. Rockwell's face twitched. Who is this? This is Sarah Thorne, Whitney said. Dr. Thorne's ex-wife. The doctor at the table went pale. Mrs. Thorne, Whitney said gently. Please tell the board what you found in your husband's safe deposit box during your divorce proceedings last month. Sarah Thorne stepped forward, her voice shaking. I found a ledger, and a second passport, and a wire transfer receipt from a shell company called Rockwell Holdings, for $2 million. "That's a lie," Rockwell shouted, standing up. "She's a bitter woman." "We have the ledger," Whitney said, dropping a heavy book onto the table. It landed with a thud that sounded like a gavel. "It details payments to Dr. Thorne dating back 3 years. Payments to oversedate Mason Noble. To keep him docile. To keep him from realizing you were siphoning assets to the Caymans." The boardroom erupted. "You weren't waiting for him to die," Whitney said, her voice rising, cutting through the noise. "You were helping him die." "You have no proof!" Rockwell screamed, losing his composure for the first time. "This is hearsay." "Is it?" Whitney pressed a button on the remote. The screen behind her lit up. It was a video, not from a security camera, but from a laptop webcam. It was Mason Noble, looking frail but fierce, dated 2 weeks before his death. "If you are watching this," Mason's video voice filled the room, "it means Rockwell has challenged the will. He thinks I'm senile. I am not. I am simply tired. I am recording this to state, with sound mind, that Quentin Rockwell is a thief. He has been stealing from the pension fund. And if he tries to take my granddaughter's birthright, I authorize the release of the black server data." Rockwell froze. The black server was a myth, a ghost story among the executives. It was where Mason supposedly kept the compromat, the blackmail material on everyone. "The server is unlocked," Whitney said coldly, "and the FBI is currently downloading the contents, including your emails, Quentin." Rockwell looked at the board members. They were all backing away from him, physically creating distance. The rats were fleeing the sinking ship. You bitch," Rockwell whispered. "That's Madam Chairwoman to you," Whitney corrected. Security moved in. This time, it wasn't just building security. It was federal agents. They had been waiting in the anteroom, listening. As Rockwell was handcuffed, he looked at Whitney with pure, unadulterated hate. "This isn't over. You think you've won? You've just painted a target on your back. The real powers, the ones above me. They won't let a girl disrupt the order." "Let them come," Whitney said. As Rockwell was marched out, the boardroom fell silent. Whitney looked at the remaining members, the men who had doubted her, the men who had looked at her medical records with judgment. "Now," Whitney said, sitting back down and smoothing her white suit. "Does anyone else have an objection to my leadership?" Silence. "Good." Whitney opened her portfolio. Item number 1. We are liquidating the Cayman shell companies and returning the stolen funds to the employee pension plan. We operate in the light now. She looked at Hannah, who was standing by the door, beaming. Whitney Noble had won the war, but Rockwell's final threat lingered in the air. The ones above me. She had cleared the board, but she had poked the eye of a much larger beast, and in the shadows, someone else was watching. Someone who didn't care about money, but about the secrets Mason Noble had hidden in that black server. The billionaire legacy was secured, but the price of keeping it was about to go up. The arrest of Quentin Rockwell was not the end of the war. It was merely the end of the opening skirmish. The real battle lay inside the black server. For 3 days, Whitney didn't leave the penthouse. She slept on the leather sofa in her grandfather's office, fueled by black coffee and the terrifying adrenaline of revelation. The server wasn't just a repository of blackmail materials on unfaithful board members or corrupt zoning commissioners. It was a map of the world's shadow economy, a spiderweb of influence that connected noble enterprises to people far more dangerous than a greedy corporate raider. "You need to see this," Uriel Dalton said, his face grim. The large security chief rarely showed emotion, but he looked pale. He turned the monitor toward her. It was a decrypted email chain dated 10 years ago. The subject line read, "Project Icarus, Mitigation." Whitney read the names. Rockwell was Seost, but the sender was an encrypted alias, Orion. The heir is becoming a liability. He intends to liquidate the offshore holdings and expose the network. Proceed with the accident protocol. The date of the email was 2 days before her parents' car crash in the Swiss Alps. Whitney felt the air leave the room. Her parents hadn't died because of icy roads. They hadn't died because of a driver's error. They were murdered. They were murdered because her father, David Noble, had tried to do exactly what she was doing now, clean up the company. Rockwell wasn't the mastermind, Whitney whispered, a cold fury settling in her chest that was far heavier than the grief she had carried for a decade. He was just the executioner. Orion, that's Senator Sterling. Uriel nodded. Senator Marcus Sterling, the chairman of the Senate Finance Committee, the man who regulates the very industry we dominate. It made perfect sense. The ones above Rockwell, the political cover, the reason Noble Enterprises had been untouchable for decades. Her grandfather, Mason, hadn't been part of the murder, but he had been too afraid to expose Sterling. He had kept the proof in the server as an insurance policy to keep Whitney alive. As long as I hold the server, they won't touch the girl, Mason had likely reasoned. But now Mason was dead, and Whitney had unlocked the box. Her phone rang. It was a blocked number. "Ms. Noble," a smooth, cultured voice said. It was unmistakably Senator Sterling. "I saw the news about Mr. Rockwell, a tragic, aggressive overreach by a mid-level executive. I trust that concludes the unpleasantness." "It concludes nothing," Whitney said, her hand gripping the phone so tight her knuckles turned white. "I know about Project Icarus." There was a long silence on the line. "That is a very old ghost story, Whitney. Digging up graveyards is a dirty business. You have your billions. You have your little victory over your ex-husband. Why not enjoy it? Go to Paris. Buy an island. Be the socialite you were born to be." "My father didn't want an island," Whitney said. "He wanted a clean conscience. And look where that got him." Sterling's voice dropped the pleasant veneer. "Listen to me closely. You are a bright young woman. But you are one woman. If that server data becomes public, the market crashes, the government destabilizes, and tragic accidents run in the family. Are you threatening me, Senator? I'm offering you a choice. Delete the server. We will ensure Noble Enterprises' stock triples in the next year. You will be the richest woman in history. Or persist, and you will find that the brakes on your car are just as unreliable as your father's." The line went dead. Whitney looked at Uriel. "He threatened to kill me." "We need to go into lockdown," Uriel said, reaching for his radio. "Safe house protocol." "No." Whitney stood up. She walked to the window, looking out at the city lights. She saw the reflection of the woman she used to be, the waitress who scraped tips together to buy Quentin Ellington a gaming chair. She saw the woman who had hidden her light to make a small man feel big. She was done hiding. "No safe house," Whitney said. "If I hide, they win. If I die, the truth dies." She turned to Hannah, who was working on a laptop in the corner. "Han, how fast can you set up a live stream?" "Fast," Hannah said, looking up. "Why?" "Rockwell used the media to try and destroy me," Whitney said, touching the black diamond ring on her finger. "I'm going to use it to save my life. I'm going live. Tonight. And I'm reading the emails." While Whitney prepared to burn down the corrupt establishment, Quentin Ellington was sitting in a holding cell at the Metropolitan Detention Center, staring at a toilet that didn't flush. He had been denied bail. The flight risk was too high, the judge had said. His assets were frozen. His Lamborghini had been impounded. Zena Harrington had released a tearful apology video where she claimed Quentin had mentally coerced her into the affair and the mockery of Whitney. She was now selling Survivor merchandise. Quentin was alone, but he had one card left to play, or so he thought. He had used his one phone call to contact a tabloid journalist, promising dirt on Whitney Noble. He promised to reveal that she was unstable, that she was vindictive, that she had planned this whole thing to humiliate him. He was led into the visitation room. He expected a reporter. Instead, he saw Olivia Anderson, Whitney's lawyer. "Where is the reporter?" Quentin demanded, sitting down in his orange jumpsuit. He looked haggard. The stubble on his face was graying, and his eyes were bloodshot. "There is no reporter, Mr. Ellington," Olivia said, opening a briefcase. "We bought the rights to your exclusive. The tabloid belongs to a subsidiary of Noble Media." Quentin slumped. "She owns everything, doesn't she?" "She does." Olivia slid a document across the metal table. "Whitney wanted me to give you this." Quentin looked at it. It was a check. His heart leapt. She still cares. She feels guilty. He looked at the amount. It was for $1,392.50. "What is this?" Quentin asked, confused. "That is the exact amount you contributed to the household expenses over the course of your 5-year marriage," Olivia said coldly. "Whitney had the accountants run the numbers. You paid for internet twice and a pizza in 2019. She is reimbursing you. She wants to be sure she owes you absolutely nothing." "She's mocking me," Quentin sneered. "No, Mr. Ellington. Mockery requires emotional investment. This is simply accounting." Olivia stood up. "Oh, and one more thing. The software you built for Nebula Flow? The proprietary code?" "It's genius," Quentin insisted. "It's worth billions." "It's stolen," Olivia corrected. "Our audit found that 90% of the source code was lifted from open-source libraries with stripped licenses. You're not just a fraud, Quentin. You're a hack. The tech community knows. You will never write a line of code in this town again." Olivia walked to the door. "Wait!" Quentin shouted, panic rising in his chest. "Tell her I'm sorry. Tell her I love her. I can change. I can be the husband she needs." Olivia didn't even turn around. The heavy steel door clanged shut, leaving Quentin Ellington alone with his check for $342.50, and the crushing realization that he was not the hero of this story. He wasn't even the villain. He was a rounding error. Meanwhile, in the penthouse, the live stream was counting down. Truthseeker was hosting the feed, beaming it to 10 million concurrent viewers. The title, Whitney Noble, The Final Truth. Whitney sat in front of a plain white wall. No red dress this time, no diamonds, just a black turtleneck and a stack of papers. "We're live in 3, 2, 1, Hannah signaled. Whitney looked into the camera lens. "My name is Whitney Noble," she began, her voice steady. "Most of you know me as the woman who was mocked in court. You know me as the barrister billionaire. You enjoyed the drama of my ex-husband's downfall. But that was just a distraction." She held up the email from the black server. "Tonight, I am not here to talk about bad marriages. I am here to talk about bad men. Powerful men. Men like Senator Marcus Sterling." The internet exploded. Comments flew by so fast they were a blur. Whitney read the email. She detailed the Project Icarus plot. She laid out the financial trails linking Rockwell to Sterling, and Sterling to the deregulation that had hurt millions of Americans. "They threatened to kill me if I released this," Whitney said, looking directly into the lens. "They told me to take the money and be quiet. But I realized something. Money without truth is just a golden cage." She picked up a tablet. "As of this moment, I have uploaded the entire contents of the black server to 3,000 independent news organizations around the world. It is out. You can't stop it. You can't kill the truth." She took a breath. and to ensure that noble enterprises can never be used as a weapon again. I am dissolving the board." Gasps in the room. Even Uriel looked shocked. "I'm restructuring the company," Whitney announced. 50% of all future profits will go into the David and Julia Noble Foundation, dedicated to corporate transparency and victim advocacy. And I am transferring ownership of 20% of the company stock to the employees, the people who actually do the work, the janitors, the coders, the baristas. She smiled, a genuine, warm smile for the first time in weeks. "My ex-husband told me I was a sunk cost. He was wrong. I was just saving up for something that mattered. The fallout was nuclear. By morning, Senator Sterling had resigned. By noon, he was under indictment. The black server leaks dominated the news cycle for months, toppling corrupt officials in 3 different countries. It was the biggest corporate whistleblowing event in history. Whitney Kingsley, now fully Whitney Noble, became a symbol, not of vengeance, but of integrity. 6 months later. Whitney walked into the Grind coffee shop in Silver Lake. It was busy. The espresso machine hissed, the smell of roasted beans filling the air. She wasn't wearing a designer suit. She was wearing jeans and a simple blouse. "Can I get a latte with oat milk?" she asked the young man at the register. He looked up, and his eyes went wide. "Oh my God, you're her." "I'm just Whitney," she smiled. You gave us the shares," the barista stammered. "My mum. She works in the Noble Call Center. Because of the stock grant, she paid off her mortgage last week. She was crying. She said you saved her life." Whitney felt a lump in her throat. This was the legacy. Not the skyscrapers, not the private jets. "This. Tell your mum I said hi," Whitney said, dropping a $100 bill in the tip jar. She took a coffee and walked outside. The sun was setting over Los Angeles. A black car pulled up. It wasn't a limo. It was a sensible armored sedan. Uriel opened the door. "Where to, boss?" "Home, Uriel," Whitney said. As she got in, she saw a billboard across the street. It was an ad for a new tech startup. The face on the billboard was young, fresh, and in the gutter below the billboard, a gust of wind blew a discarded newspaper. The headline read, "Quentin Ellington sentenced to 8 years for fraud." Whitney didn't smile. She didn't feel joy at his suffering. She felt indifference. He was the past, a lesson learned in the dark so she could appreciate the light. She looked at her phone. Hannah had sent a text. "Han. Hey, the new board of directors meeting is in an hour. You ready?" Whitney typed back. "Whit. I was born ready." She wasn't the girl who served coffee anymore. She wasn't the victim in the polyester suit. She was Whitney Noble. And she had a world to fix. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of Whitney Noble. She started as a bad investment and ended up owning the bank. But the real twist wasn't the money. It wasn't the billions. It was the realization that your value isn't determined by who you marry, what shoes you wear, or what some arrogant guy says about you in a courtroom. Your value is what you stand for when the world tries to knock you down. Quentin Ellington chased status and lost his freedom. Whitney chased the truth and found her power. Karma didn't just hit back, it reshaped the world. If you enjoyed this story of revenge, redemption, and billions, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Don't forget to share this with someone who needs a reminder that they are worth more than they think. And make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a story. We have more tales of justice coming your way soon. Remember, the best revenge isn't making them pay. It's living a life so full, so successful, and so true that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. Thanks for watching. Stay strong and stay noble.